Forestall, Chapter 10. After school that day, I found a surprise in my locker. Not a good one, though. I opened my locker to put away some books and to get my Cubs hat, and there it was, staring at me, with the type of vacant look that only death can supply. A dead rat. I was just barely able to hold back a yell. I think probably the only reason I didn't make a fool of myself right then and there was because the rat lying on top of the shelf of my locker was actually pretty small and white, like the kind that are in the school science lab, and not the huge gray beasts like you see in movies that eat small deer for snacks and would give you a bubonic plague. After I reminded myself that it was only really just a mouse after all, I nudged it onto a piece of paper and tossed it in the garbage. Although the dead rat had been gross, there wasn't that wasn't what was bothering me. It was the message it was supposed to send. I looked around inside my locker and found the note I knew would be there. I unfolded the piece of paper. On it was a simple message handwritten: Friends of rats end up dead. Give us Fred by the end of tomorrow, or you'll be roadkill. Vince showed up just as I finished reading the note. What's that? He asked. It's nothing, I said as I tossed the note into my locker and slammed it shut. I decided not to tell anyone. They just panic. The last thing I needed was Joe and Vince panicking. Besides, there was no way I was going to just hand over Fred. Not now. We were way past that. Oh, Vince said. What, no joke? He shrugged. Nah, I'm not really in the mood for jokes. Something was up. Vince was almost always in the mood for jokes. The longest he had ever went without making a joke was after his dad died. That was about 4 years ago. For 2 weeks after, he and I just hung out in the old trailer park playground. We didn't really do much. We just sat on the swings next to each other, and I pretended not to notice that Vince was crying. I don't think he was ever embarrassed about it. I think he was just happy to have me there, and that was good enough for me. I remember feeling helpless. Here I was, the kid who had answered to everybody's problems, but I had no answer for Vince. There was no trick I could pull off that would bring my best friend's dad back. I'd have given up anything, but it just wasn't possible. Eventually, Vincent sort of found a way to move on, but it still bothers me to this day that I hadn't been able to do more for him when he needed most. What's wrong, Vince? I asked. Oh, nothing. Just a bad day at school, he said. I nodded, but I wasn't sure I believed him. He's too smart to have bad days at school. In fact, I'm pretty sure he's smarter than every teacher he's had. But I let it go. Everybody was allowed to be in a bad mood once in a while. Say, I'm going to head to the office after school to go over some more numbers so you guys can head out without me. I'll see you. I'll still see you tonight though for the game, Vince said. Sure thing, I said. Vince had never spent much time at the office alone before. I was starting to get a little concerned. I think the Cubs actually being good had affected him more than I thought. That night, Vince, Joe, and I came over to hang out and discuss some of our regular business matters. Joe laughed when Vince and I switched the TV to the Cubs game at 7. Baseball is so boring. How can you stand to watch it with all the time? Stand to watch it all the time, Joe said as he got up to leave. What? I said. Now, not if you know what you're watching, it isn't. Baseball is the thinking person's sport. Plus, I mean, it's the Cubs, said Vince. He looked at Joe with concern, like a doctor might at a patient with a massive head injury. Joe laughed and called us crazy one more time before leaving. All right, Vince, I've got a good one for you, I said, as the first inning got underway. Give me your best shot, Tree Master, Vince said sarcastically. It was a relief to see that humorous glow back in his eyes. I guess whatever he'd done back at the office after school had cheered him up. Okay, then. In 1930, which Cub had one of the greatest offensive seasons in baseball history with 56 homers and 191 RBIs? Whew, that's a tough one, but you'll have to do a little better than that one, Mac. The answer is Hack Wilson. Whatever, you cheater, I said. Right. How can I cheat at trivia? I can't help it if my brain just happens to hold more Cubs knowledge because I'm a bigger fan than you. I grinned and threw a handful of popcorn at him. After a few minutes, Vince's face got really serious. What is it, Vince? Mac, you do realize that we're not going to be able to afford to go to the game at this rate, right? Vince said. What do you mean? Mac, you just promised those bullies almost $200 for beating up Willis. That's a lot of cash, my friend. We don't really have that money for payouts like that. He sounded as worried as I'd heard him in years, and maybe even a little angry. We'll be okay, don't worry. Once we get this Staples thing taken care of, then we'll just work extra hard to make up for it, I said. If Vince was telling me we wouldn't have enough, then that was probably true. Vince was almost never wrong when it came to money. Then again, he was also overly cautious when it came to our finances. Do we really have to pay everybody so much? They probably would have worked for less, Vince said. Yeah, okay, I'll try to be more careful. Sorry. I just think I'd snap if the Cubs make it this year and we miss out on the game. Plus, it's not like those kids need our money all that bad. These are bullies, Mac. They steal other kids' lunch money. I just think that if we're going to blow our chances to go to the Cubs World Series game, that it should be for a better cause. Geez, Vince, I said I was sorry, okay? Do you think I know that? I'm just doing what I think is necessary to save our business. Do you have any better ideas? I kind of regretted my tone as soon as those words left my mouth. This was getting too close to a fight for me. No, I guess not. I just think sometimes you forget what it's like to not have everything you want all the time, Vince said. What's that supposed to mean? I asked. Nothing. Forget it, Vince said. He hesitated. Had he been referring to the fact that my dad is still around, or that my family moved out of the trailer park and lives in a house now? If so, where the heck did that come from? He knows that everything I have is his too. We share everything. This is just the worst time ever for Staples to suddenly show up, I finally said. Vince agreed with a nod, and we left it at that. We rarely argued about money, but the Cubs game was changing things a bit. The Cubs won that night, advancing to the National League Championship Series for the first time in over 10 years. They just needed to win 4 of their next 7 games, and they'd make it to the World Series for the first time in basically forever. The good news was that they dominated their opponent, the Phillies, all season long. The bad news was that the tickets weren't getting any cheaper. We needed extra money now more than ever. After the game, Vince and I looked at each other and nodded. We didn't even have to say it. Going to this game was truly a once in a lifetime opportunity, and we couldn't let it pass. We really needed to take out Staples and fast. The next morning, which was Thursday in case you're keeping track, we all gathered in the bathroom at first recess. Me, Vince, Joe, Fred, Brady, and the 9 newly hired bullies. The bathroom got kind of hot and smelly with that many kids all grouped in there. We tried to ignore the smell as I congratulated them on their successful hit. Barnaby Willis hadn't even shown up for school that day. Prep school said word was he would transfer to a new school due to some of the absurdly vulgar emails Ibley had sent to the school board from Barnaby Willis's email account. But coming from her, I had no idea if I could believe that. I gave them their well-earned $20, and they started discussing phase 2 of the plan to take down Staples' operation in my school. I went over the names of all the bookies that I had discovered, as well as where they were normally stationed. I showed the bullies the school photos from the year before and gave them instructions to patrol the area around their assigned bookie, making sure that no kid got near enough to place another bet. If the kids still tried to get by, then the bullies were supposed to convince them that it was not a good idea. What do you mean convince them? Nubby asked. Like with words or what? Make them not want to place another bet, I said. How do we do that? Nubby asked. By whatever means necessary, if you know what I mean. Make them an offer they can't refuse, I said. I heard someone say that in a movie once. It's one of my favorite phrases. What you mean by that? Great White snapped. Stop talking in bloody riddles and just tell us what you want us to do, eh? Intimidate them. Use a little bit of force if you have to. Just get them to stop placing bets. Only don't go overboard. I don't want any of these kids to have to go to the nurse, okay? These kids are not to be roughed up like what you did to the collector. With that, I assigned them each a bookie and gave them $10. I'll be out monitoring the situation this afternoon, and if I'm satisfied with the results, you'll get the other $10, I said. Then they left to wreak havoc on my school. I felt a little nauseous. I didn't really like paying 9 of the meaner, tougher kids at the school to go intimidate the bully mostly innocent kids and cause problems. For the sake of our business, the future of the school, and the Cubs game, it had to be done. At lunch that day, we closed up office so Joe and I could monitor the progress of our plan while Vince stayed behind to watch over Fred. We started out in the upper playground. Everything appeared to be going well. The bookies stood at their stations alone. Every time a potential customer approached, the bully assigned to that bookie would get in their face, and the customer would sulk away. Pretty soon, it became obvious to the kids in the playground what was happening. After a while, nobody even tried to place a bet, especially after Snapper almost bit off this one kid's thumb to keep him from approaching the bookie. It was when Joe and I were on the grade side school, the playground, when I saw something shocking. We had just finished watching some kids make fun of one of the bookies about this really horrible rumor that prep school had started about him sneaking home chunks of the school's meatloaf in his backpack because he was building a meatloaf castle in his bedroom that he was going to live in with his pet hamster Charleston. Anyway, we moved on to Jackie Boy's post, and that's when I saw him. I didn't know who it was at first because his back was turned to us, but some kid was having a heated conversation with Jackie Boy. Jackie Boy kept slamming his finger into his palm as if he was expecting the kid to put a stack of cash into it. The other kid shook his head so vigorously I thought it might fall off and roll down the hill where someone might mistake it for a kickball and punt it into the street. Joe and I glanced at each other and repositioned ourselves so we could get a better look at who the kid Jackie Boy was arguing with. The recognition hit me like a medicine ball chest pass from Arnold Schwarzenegger. It was Brady. I motioned for Joe to go check it out in person while I considered the implications. But before I really had a chance to process what it all might mean, the attack happened. I should have been expecting it considering what we had done to Barnaby the day before, but I guess I didn't realize just how many kids Staples had under his control. Right after Joe left my side, I felt hands grab my shoulders and spin me around. I've been looking for you. I looked up at the kid's face. It was a pretty big seventh grader who I recognized but didn't really know. What? Do you really think you'll get away with all this? He said. With what? He looked confused. I tried to look confused back. You're Mac, right? Who? I said, making sure I looked more lost than ever. His grip on my shirt loosened, and he tried to figure out if I was lying. I quickly pulled away from him and ran. I headed towards the teeter-totters. I could feel him right behind me. I heard kids cheering me on as if it were some sort of game. I wanted to at them to go trip the kid instead of just yelling stuff like, yeah, go, Mac. I quickly hopped onto the empty teeter-totter and ran to the middle so it tilted down the other way. My attacker ran around the other side and stopped. He smiled at me. I stood in the middle of the teeter-totter, balancing it so it was parallel with the ground. Let's go, loser. You trying to get me or what? I said to my attacker. He scowled and charged at me. As soon as he lunged forward, I jumped from the middle to the teeter-totter uh, onto the seat behind him. The other end fired up like a Chuck Norris roundhouse. I didn't exactly see what happened because I was too busy making sure I landed on my feet, but I heard a crack and that sounded like a baseball bat being crushed out of its skin by a wooden baseball bat. The attacker was on the ground moaning, and I felt a little bad. I stepped forward to see how badly he was hurt, but he looked up like he was going to murder me. I turned to run, and he started getting to his feet, but there was no need. Kitten just came flying out of nowhere and did what he does best, something insane. He bent over my attacker, and while I couldn't see what was happening, the screams coming from the seventh grader were horrible. Whoops. Or horrifying, sorry, were horrifying. Ah, okay, okay, please, the seventh grader pleaded. Kitten stood up, a stapler hanging from his hand in the open position. The kid's pant leg was full of staples. I helped the seventh grader to his feet. Let's go, I said, and led him around the side of the building where I could talk to him in private. Kitten stayed close. Are you done? I asked the kid as I shoved him against the school. Yes, yes, I'm sorry. I only did it because I owe Staples a lot of money, and Justin said that I would have to pay him back if I beat you, that I wouldn't have to pay him back if I beat you up. He said something about avenging Willis or something like that. I don't know. I hardly know the guy. How did you know to find me out here? This is just where Justin told me to watch for you. That's all I know, I swear. I didn't even want to do it, but I had no choice. His eyes nervously flicked back and forth between the stapler and Kitten's hand and my face. I nodded and took a step back. The kid uh, pulled at the places on his leg where Kitten had stapled him and then whimpered like a puppy. Okay, I'm going to let you go, but I better not ever see you in this sort of a situation again. Got it? Yeah, I swear. I really didn't even want to do it in the first place. Thanks, Mac, really said, and then limped towards the school. I watched as he went inside, probably to the bathroom, where he could cry in private. Justin had known that I was going to be out here today, and I had no idea to even watch out for that kid. Something definitely wasn't right. First the Tanzim thing and now this. I was getting a bad feeling that I had a snitch on my hands. And considering what I just saw moments before the attack, I had a good idea of who it might be. One thing was definitely pretty clear. I couldn't trust anybody outside our business anymore. During after school recess, I dismissed all the bullies and my other employees except for Fred, Joe, and Vince. There was no sense in moving forward with any further plans until we took care of the snitch. As long as Staples had a man on the inside, none of us were safe. I scheduled a meeting for Joe, Vince, and me for later that night to discuss what to do about the mole. At least the plan to neutralize Staples' influence here was working for the time being. No bets were being placed, and we had eliminated the collector. That's why it was too bad that it all came crashing down after school that day, a day I now refer to as Black Thursday.